Face the event. From brand ambassadors and event staffers to magicians and presenters, it's the one and only podcast to introduce the faces in and around the trade show and events industry. And here's our host, Scott Tokar.
Hello and welcome to Face the Event. My name is Scott Tokar. I am your host for this look into the world of brand ambassadors, trade show staffers, badge scanners, crowd gatherers. If you represent a product live, in person, and you're gigging, you're not doing this on a payroll, well, this probably is the podcast for you, because we look into the world of trade shows and in-store demos, bar demos, that kind of thing. This week, we're going to talk with someone about the world of auto shows. If you've ever been to an auto show, that is those trade shows, those consumer trade shows you get to go to the local convention center for and learn all about the Fords, the Mazdas, the Maseratis, this is the podcast for you, because we're going to talk with Laura Harwood, who does this from city to city, representing the exact same brand. She's sort of the brand ambassador for this particular brand, and she's going to tell us all about the world of auto shows. But before we learn about that, I always ask our guests a question, something that they can answer that's they've learned along the way of working in this industry. This week's question is, I wonder, what is the strangest, most unusual, or most memorable product that you've ever worked for?
The craziest and most unique company that I ever worked for would definitely be Revlon. That is where I was a painted mannequin.
The craziest client I've ever worked for had me in 5-inch heels that they bought, carrying china into their meeting rooms, and were no consideration that I was about to drop this heavy. They had me stand and wait for a good 15 minutes before I could go in. So that will always live up to be the craziest client ever.
One of the oddest things I've personally worked was in Chicago for US Cellular, and the campaign was called, I think, Talk Till You're Blue in the Face. And there was different elements of the campaign, but as a brand ambassador, part of it was wearing a giant ear. So you were walking around as a giant ear and delivering talking points.
I've never really had a product. I mean, there have been products that I've represented that 6 months later were no longer in existence. They do like these big giant rollouts for a product that you go out and promote the heck out of it, and they just weren't around 6 months later.
So when I was a painted mannequin for Revlon, I had to go through a long, dramatic process of having my body painted, having my face painted, having colored contacts put in, having my hair entirely braided back to have a rainbow-colored wig on. I had platform heels, literally this big. And a tight, long dress so I could barely move my legs when I walked. And then once I got onto the podium, I had to completely freeze for 30 minutes at a time and not move so that everyone thought I was actually a mannequin.
You painted your face blue, like Blue Man, sort of, and you had a shirt that said Talk Till You're Blue in the Face. We would go on to high traffic areas. It was guerrilla marketing, not permitted, not sanctioned, or maybe it was, I don't know. But we would go on to the L train and just have ridiculous conversations, like the most weird left field improv character-driven conversations we could.
We worked until there was good 12-hour days in the heels, and they were wondering towards the end of the day why our feet were hurting. But so we all at the end of that felt like we had a Girl Scout badge that we survived that show, and it was a 7-day show too. So. Whew, it was brutal.
This was a trucking company at the oil show, and they asked us to wear heels, but there were 3 of us, and they asked us to kind of rotate our brakes, and it was an 8-hour show. But at the end of the day, they were like, "Oh, we're sorry, we didn't communicate this really well. We just wanted one person every 15 minutes, and for you guys to rotate because you were in heels." And we were like, cool.
occasionally get a product where you are doing the samplings and people taste them. It's like, oh my God, this just tastes terrible. It's like, there's nothing you can say. Well, taste is taste.
And mind you, they had extra plush carpet in their trade show booth. So it wasn't like the hills were a rough thing to do. And they wanted us to sit down and talk to clients and refer them to their salespeople. Like, they wanted us to build relationships. So if we were sitting down, it was great. They loved that. So it was crazy, even though we had to wear heels, but it was like so easy to do because it was every 15 minutes we were rotating between 3 people. So yes, love that show.
As we could, and be like, is that right? A rhinoceros, you say? No. And just be stupid. And then as people looked over, we'd be like, pointing to our shirt saying "Talk to you blue in the face," and it had details about like unlimited and blah blah blah.
But sometimes it's tough to, products that you just know aren't going to make it, and you've got to give it your best shot. But yeah, those are tough.
I'd say that was one of the more memorable ones that I can think of that didn't involve whipped cream or anything weird.
Amy, we want to thank Laura Harwood, Amy Cosgrove, Philip Victor, Rick Gerber, and Channon Dade for their insights into the world of the craziest products they've ever worked for. So if you've ever thought about looking at the world of auto shows, that is, standing in front of an automobile and talking to the audience about the features and the benefits, the pricing and the options that are available on any car. Sometimes you get to stand on a round turntable as the car turns around and answer questions from a crowd. And you thought, gee, I want that gig. That sounds like a good job to me. Well, we're going to answer all the questions you might have about auto shows with my good friend Laura Harwood. Now, Laura started her career in Detroit, then moved to Chicago, and now she lives in Las Vegas, and she is the quintessential showgirl in Las Vegas, where she actually does appear as a showgirl in a show in the evening downtown. But during the day, you can find her in the trade show convention halls like the Las Vegas Convention Center, the Sands Expo Center, and the Mandalay Bay. Well, why don't I let Laura tell us her story? So without any further ado, here's Laura Harwood. So, hello Laura, welcome to Face the Event. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So how long have you been doing trade shows or events? When was your first one?
My first trade show was back in 2012.
Oh, so you've been doing this for a while?
Yeah, on and off. So I haven't been doing it consistently since 2012, but definitely have used it kind of like through the gaps of time. So
do you remember your very first trade show?
Yes, it was the Detroit Auto Show.
Oh, over in Cobo Hall.
Yep.
Know it well. Interesting location too, because depending on the direction you walk, you may not want to walk there at night.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, when you were working that show, were you local to Detroit at that time?
I was.
Oh, okay. So you know the neighborhood and stuff.
I don't really know the neighborhood. I'm from Monroe, Michigan, so it's kind of a suburb. I'm not like super familiar with the surroundings of that specific neighborhood, but I'm familiar with Detroit.
Okay, so you were working a local show. Were you working for like a car company, or were you working for like another exhibitor there? How did that work?
Yes, I was working for a car company.
Oh.
I was working for Ford, actually.
Well, that's a kind of a dream job. That sounds great. How did you get hired?
One of my friends actually had been working in trade shows, and she had actually been like going around doing different auto shows. So she had mentioned to me, she was actually from Chicago, and we went to college together. And she had mentioned to me that they needed another assistant, and she knew that I lived nearby, so yeah, that's kind of how I got involved. I just jumped in.
Cool. So a lot of these things really it matters because you have to know somebody to kind of get into it at first. But did you have to go through an agency in order to get that gig, or did you book directly with Ford? How did that work?
So for that one, I did go through an agency, but like you said, it was kind of, my in was kind of through my friend. So I did a phone interview, and just kind of worked out well in my favor for that specific circumstance.
Now, when you were living in Michigan, did you then work other places besides Cobo Hall, or did you just work events in Cobo Hall at that time?
That was the only one in Michigan, but I had been going back and forth a lot from Chicago because I was, at the time, still going to school in Chicago. So I did some more convention work at McCormick Place.
Ah, and Chicago's a great place because you have McCormick Place, you have Navy Pier, even out by the airport you have Rosemont as well. Yeah. So there's a lot of trade shows in Chicago for sure.
Yeah.
Plus McCormick Place is like 3 huge convention centers all in one spot.
Yeah, it's ginormous.
What kind of shows did you do in Chicago?
Oh gosh, it's been such a long time. There's so many abbreviations. I don't even, I can't think of them off the top of my head. Like, this was so far back.
Were there any products or things that were really fun to work with?
I worked for Godiva Chocolate once. I was like a food and snack convention. That one was a lot of fun. I wore like a baker hat, and we dealt with chocolates the entire weekend. So I remember that one being fun because people actually like wanted to come up to you consistently to like try all the chocolates.
To get a chocolate, of course.
Yeah. So it was like a nice...
You said you were wearing a baker's hat. Do you find yourself having to wear costumes in this environment a lot, or is that something that's kind of rare?
Not all the time, but definitely there's been certain circumstances, especially if I ever get hired, because I'm a dance performer and showgirl too. So especially in Las Vegas, it seems that they tend to use more costumes for trade shows to try to like attract more people in or like bring some more entertainment, where I feel like the other cities don't have as many costumes per se. There's usually always a uniform. But yeah, that was my only time, I think, in Chicago. Well, there was one other time. It was called Floretica, and all of the local grocery markets had donated tons of produce and flowers, and it kind of became like this big fashion show. And that was the only other time I was completely dressed up in like leaves and flowers. They made this entire dress. They had to build it on my body, and it took like 5 hours. Oh, now did you get paid for the time that they were actually like dressing you in this stuff, as well as the time that you were on the show floor? Yes. Oh, what a bonus. And actually, there's another one I remember in Chicago that I did. It's the American Beauty Show, so it's ABS. Okay. And that one was probably the hardest trade show I ever had to do, because I was working for Revlon, and I had to be in full body makeup. They wanted me to be like this robot that matched their logo for that year. And so my whole body had to get painted white like a mannequin. And then they put colored contacts in my eyes, like that were like rainbow color. I had a wig that was rainbow color. So I had to go into these like full on braids every morning to have the wig put on. The whole process was the same. It took like 5 hours. And so we had to wake up at 4 a.m. every morning just to go through the process of getting ready. Wow. And then they put like this metallic kind of bodysuit over us, but like my arms were exposed, head was exposed, parts of my legs. And like through the day in trade shows, they usually crank up the AC just to keep everyone like awake and moving. But I remember I had like this wet paint all over my body, and like the air conditioning was blowing, and we had to be robots. So we stood on these like platforms, and you couldn't move. You had to look like a statue or a mannequin. So that was definitely the hardest one that I ever had to do, because you had to like stand on for 30 minutes, and you had off for 30 minutes, on for 30 minutes. But it was like freezing cold, all these people like staring at you, and you couldn't smile, you couldn't laugh, you couldn't move your arms. Yeah, that was a rough one. That sounds tough. Now,
Now you're in Vegas now. That's what
Yes.
you mentioned. Now, so you've had the experience of being in Cobo Hall in Detroit. You've had the chance of being in McCormick and all the other spots there in Chicago. And now you're in Vegas. What's the difference between the venues? Do you see a difference in the way that people are or the type of shows you're in?
I would say as a whole, I just noticed in Vegas, there seems to be more of an entertainment aspect. I don't know. It seems like every booth is trying to do something flashy to kind of outdo the other booth or stand out. Whereas that still happens in other trade shows in other cities. I just don't notice it as dramatically as I do in Vegas. I feel like Vegas, they really like to put on a show.
Yeah, and I think that the opportunities, the things that they're willing to kind of play with are a little bit different in Vegas. Now, I know because I've been at like the National Broadcasting Show there in Vegas. And I remember a camera company did that same body paint kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there they were a little bit more risque. They actually like painted over a naked woman. Have you ever had to do stuff like that? Or is that like totally... you've got to be paid a lot more to do that, I would imagine.
Yeah, I did have to do something similar to that one time here for the opening of a restaurant called Catch. I can't remember which hotel. I think it's in Aria. But anyways, they did a grand opening, and so there's a whole entire hallway of flowers, like covered on both sides of the walls as you walk in. And they wanted to use models to blend in with the wall. And yeah, so I mean, you're not like entirely naked, but it's very like you're very exposed and you're just completely painted. I think the painting for that took like 6 to 7 hours. And you just have to stand there and not move. And like all these people are just like painting all over your body.
So this is interesting. A lot of the people we've spoken to on Face the Event have been doing a lot more crowd gathering and speaking kind of things. And it sounds to me that you've done a lot of events where you don't speak at all. You actually have to almost be, like you say, a robot or a statue.
Yeah.
Is that a common thing for you?
No, it's not common. I think just because I kind of have dove into different directions. So like I've done modeling, I've done performing, and then I've done more like specific trade show where sometimes they want you to come in, learn about the product, and talk to clients about the product. So yeah, I've kind of like gone all different revenues.
You've also been cut in half before too, haven't you?
Yes, that's, as I was just going to say too. So also I've been a magician's assistant in trade shows too. So that one also is not a lot of speaking, but I have to be physically interactive with the audience.
And you're one of the very best magician's assistants out there, I must say.
Thank you. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Love working with you. But
yes, that was a great trade show.
That was really fun. We did a couple of them, and definitely you are a professional out there. So a trade show is typically what, 3 days long?
Yes, but I would say in Vegas, there's also quite a few that last like even 5 to 6 days. I know CES is a little bit longer.
World of Concrete, Con Expo.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's a few that last a little bit longer.
I like the shows that last longer because it takes so long to try to get a booking. And I'd much rather spend my time getting the booking and then turn out with 5 days worth of paid work than, a day or two.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
That's like a bonus. You get extra days of work, and boy, I'd much rather be working than sitting at home.
Definitely.
So what in a typical trade show, if you're not wearing a costume, what do the exhibitors ask you to wear?
So typically it's either a white button-up blouse with like a pencil black skirt or black slacks. Some places require heels. I always feel like it's a blessing when they say you can wear nice, like, dress flats.
Especially for 8 hours on a trade show floor.
Yes, because you can definitely feel your feet swelling and hurting as the day progresses. So
yeah, I don't wear heels, and that worries me.
Yeah. But then there's also quite a few booths that I've worked for where they usually have a shirt for you. So sometimes it's like a button-up shirt with their logo, or just a regular t-shirt, and usually still wear like black slacks, and then, like I said, either flats or heels. And once in a while, I'll even get some people who tell me that I can wear sneakers, which is like the gold.
Now, do you work usually by yourself or with a team of other presenters or?
Yeah, so it honestly just depends. It seems like usually the bigger the booth, the more people I end up working with. And then if the booth is fairly small, then they typically want 1 to 2 people. So I've kind of done across the board. I've worked some by myself. I've worked some with one other person, and then I've had events where there's like 5 or 6 people who are hired. So
are you working through an agency typically?
I typically am, yes. There's been a few that I've been booked directly with some clients that I've already worked with a couple times. Then they'll just contact me directly. They already have my information. So those are always nice. But yeah, typically I work through an agency, and it's not always the same agency either. There's actually, in Vegas, it seems to be more than any other city. There's so many agencies. So yeah, it's kind of scattered a little bit.
So tell me, how do you know you're working for a reputable agency?
I would say, honestly, for me, it was more by word of mouth, because I moved here and I already knew a lot of entertainers who had lived here a lot longer than me. So they kind of gave me the ins and the outs of who I could trust, who is a little bit sketchy as far as like when you'll get paid, if you for sure will get paid, how long it takes to get paid. So I kind of just went off of word of mouth and trust with other friends or people that I've worked with before, to be honest, because when I came, I didn't really know exactly where to look.
Now, you in Vegas, not only do you do brand ambassadoring and trade shows, but you also work in an actual show usually there in Vegas, don't you?
Yes.
So when someone says they need a showgirl type, you're actually the showgirl type.
Yes.
That probably helps too.
Yes, it definitely does. And yeah, that's why even in the midst of this whole virus, I've taken the time with my friend to have our own costumes designed, because that just takes one step out from working with other clients where we have to usually rent costumes for the week if we want to work a trade show and they need like a showgirl or something. So now I've kind of taken this time to get my own costumes for different events, even like tango dancing or like salsa dancing. So across the board. And
this is brilliant. You know, the thing that I like to see, all talent. You know, I've been working as an independent contractor myself in trade shows and sales meetings and promotions since for many, many years. I don't want to say how long. But the advantage of getting booked myself is that I'm in control of everything.
Yeah.
And I actually get paid more because there's never a cut that has to go to an agent or a manager.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's really smart of you to be prepped out that way, to have those costumes and those options for your customers. It makes you much more marketable too.
Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely been a good transition and a good investment.
So if you could give yourself some advice back when, think back to the time that you were at Cobo Hall, and
Mm-hmm.
all this information today that you've learned from doing these trade shows and brand ambassadoring, what kind of advice would you give yourself just starting out?
I would just say mostly logistics of day to day, that small things that took me a while. For example, I remember the first time that I worked CES, and the parking is so crazy. So you have to take the tram in. And I didn't bring an extra pair of shoes, and I was required to wear heels. And so just the whole process of parking my car, walking to the train, like taking it in, then walking and finding my booth, and like so on and so forth, this and that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I learned my lesson so quickly. Like, always bring an extra pair of shoes in your bag. So as soon as you're done, you can like switch into sneakers or switch into flats. That was a big thing I wish I could have told myself, or known, in advance.
That's definitely a pro tip.
Yeah. Another thing is layers, because it seems like always as the day progresses, it gets colder and colder and colder. And so, if you are required to wear a t-shirt for your booth or any type of body paint or anything like that, then, that was another lesson I had to learn really quick too, because I was just like
I think that's freezing. A unique thing to Vegas, because I think what ends up happening is they don't run any air. They try to keep the hall running as inexpensively as possible. And then out there in the desert, they turn on the air. And then by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it is freezing in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good tip too. Too. So how would I go about finding an agent to get started in this?
Again, like I said, the best way that I was able to do it is through friends. So I'm not the best at knowing exactly where to look online. I know that there's a Facebook group.
Yeah, we had on the show, we had Philip Victor. If you're wondering about these Facebook groups, they're called Brand Ambassador of. So like Brand Ambassador of Vegas, Brand Ambassador of Chicago. Philip Victor is the guy who started all of those groups. And, a few episodes back, you'll have to look back in the podcast directory. Look for the interview with Philip Victor to learn all about that. That's a great tip. Go join those groups.
Yeah. So I am a part of the Vegas group. So I would say if I was a new person to a city, that would be the first step in finding some agencies, because I feel like there's a lot of posts on there. And then for me, it was just kind of like learning through word of mouth. So I kind of learned which agencies I like to work with and which agencies are going to take me 90 days or more to pay out, or that I might have to call and remind like 10 times. So I've learned.
We're going to do coming up here as a Face the Event. We're going to talk about how to be your own independent contractor here, because it's something that I really believe in. And I'm going to talk to people in the future here. So make sure you're subscribing to our podcast. I'm going to be talking about how you can accept credit cards to get paid right there on the trade show floor, how to write your own contract so that you are protected. And if you need insurance, because a lot of times the agents will say, well, the difference between hiring an agent and someone directly is that the agent has insurance, liability insurance. But that only costs like $225 a year for millions of dollars of that coverage. So we'll teach everyone how to do that. Make sure you subscribe to that.
Okay, for sure.
Well, Laura, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with us. And, hey, I always ask people, do you want to be followed on like Instagram or anything? Is there something that you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, sure. I would say that's probably where I post most of my stuff. I use that platform the most. So my Instagram is at lau.rahar.wood.
All right. Well, that'll also be in the notes here of the show. So if you didn't hear that, make sure you check out the notes, and we'll have a link to Laura's Instagram right there. Laura, thanks so much for spending some time with us on Face the Event.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I look forward to working with you again soon.
Yes, you too. Thank you so much.
We want to thank Laura Harwood for sharing with us her insights to the world of auto shows and Las Vegas, and really the world of being a brand ambassador, a trade show staffer. Every week, we like to end our podcast with something that's going to make you smile. We call it a face palm. This is an embarrassing or unusual event that you saw or were part of while on an activation. And this week's face palm is from Amy Cosgrove.
Oh, the So this happens more than people think, this facepalm moment. But the one where you're handing out gifts at the end, like a raffle, and someone doesn't win, and these grown adults like start fighting with each other, it happens way more than people think. People get really bent out of a shape on like a GoPro or like a, they like, it's like this childhood like comes back into them. So it's a thing. So those gifts, again, they can be a good thing, but when they're not good, it's it's dicey. I had an experience once where this guy thought he won. We pulled it, so he came up and he didn't, and the other guy went up to grab the gift and he threw it at the other guy and walked away. And we were all just like, wow, that just happened. So most of the time people are gracious and super happy, and it's a great thing, but you will see the claws come out when things go wrong, and it's super awkward. The moral to the story is, remember, it's free. Everyone's here for, to learn from the convention, not to win an iPad. If you do, it's the icing on the cake, so be grateful. And yeah, just, you don't be a baby over it. You're going to be okay, even if you don't win.
We want to thank Amy Cosgrove for sharing with us her facepalm. Boy, some of these stories you'll never forget. Well, that wraps it up for this week's Face the Event. I hope that you will like and subscribe to this podcast. Remember, we're on Stitcher, we're on Amazon's Alexa, we're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify. Wherever you're listening to this, will you do me a favor? First off, subscribe, and secondly, would you rate and comment on this podcast? That gives us encouragement and helps us keep going. Helps other people to find us too, because it lifts us up in the search values. So help yourself, help others, like, subscribe, and comment. Well, until next week, I can't wait to see you out on a live activation, and I can't wait to face the event with you.